Hello, 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 hello. Happy Thursday. Happy Thursday. Thank you so much for joining on today. I usually give people a minute to jump on in, but I think I'm going to go ahead on and get started on today. Um, I'll stop as I see people come on in. If you are already in here, go ahead on and hit the share. Let somebody know that we are live. And we're going to be talking about the topic of complex trauma, which we started talking about that topic a couple of days ago. But we're going to continue talking about that today. Yesterday, we talked about the impact of complex trauma on relationships. Today, we're going to be talking about when the victim becomes the victimizer. So we left off on yesterday. If you did not catch us yesterday, then you want to go back and catch yesterday's live or go watch yesterday's live, because we left off talking about how when a person has gone through complex trauma and how it can lead them into different responses. Let's just say that we talked about different responses. When a person has gone through complex trauma, it leads them into certain responses. They have some certain responses that come out of that. So we talked about the fight, flight, or freeze response to conflict. We talk about how they typically struggle with boundaries if they've gone through complex trauma. They struggle with intimacy. They struggle with communicating what they want, what they need, what they desire. And we also talked about their choice of partners, how they usually pick partners who are broken. And we talked about the little statement that their picker is broken or their picker is off. So they either pick partners who confirm how they feel about themselves, or they pick partners who are like or similar to or remind them to certain situations that happened to them in their past, or especially if they grew up in abuse, with in abused households, or if they've grown up or experienced some type of trauma, they typically pick partners who will either try and attempt to, because they really don't. People can't fill gaps in our hole. I mean, gaps in our heart. People can't do that. We know that, right? We don't know that. We should know that. People cannot fill gaps in your heart. They can't heal you. And so usually when people have gone through some type of traumas in the aspect of complex traumas, they may look for relationships to try to fill the gaps that are in their heart. So that if they don't feel loved, then they try to pick partners who will make them feel loved, or help make them feel secure, or make them feel wanted, or make them feel desired. And they may go from partner to partner to partner, because what they realize or what they come to the conclusion of is that people, they don't complete us. Like, that's a whole myth. Can I get somebody to type that out? People cannot complete you. That is a myth that has been floating around. And I've heard that so much with women. Oh, they complete me. And I've heard not just with women, but with men too, that our partners complete us. That is a whole lie. People cannot complete you. That is not their job to complete you. Neither should you seek people to complete you, because that implies that there's something missing in you. There's something broken in you. There's something that you don't like about you, that you feel like having somebody coming into your life will help change that part of you, or will make you feel better about who you are, or make you feel more secure about who you are. And so that is a whole lie. We need to scratch that lie. And if that is you, if you're one of the people that continue to have that, or continue to hold that idea that being with somebody will make you look better, or being married or being in a relationship will make you feel better about who you are, or how you feel about yourself, then that means that there's some things about you that are broken, and they will not fix your brokenness. People are horrible substitutes for brokenness. Horrible substitutes for brokenness. Can I get somebody to type that out? Like, that's a whole quote. People are horrible substitutes for brokenness. They won't feel it. It's not their job. It's not their role to. So today, I'm Dr. Tiffany, by the way. I'm Dr. Tiffany. I'm a trained marriage and family therapist. I work as a coach and a consultant, mental health coach and consultant. I'm a relationship expert. So a lot of times when you see me doing things like this, I'm gonna always be talking about relationships and mental health because I always advocate. Like I'm a strong advocate for mental health and people being healed and people being whole. And I'm also a strong advocate for relationships because I feel like relationships are the foundation of everything. They're at the foundation of everything that we do, whether on the job or whether, at home. You're going to have a relationship at some point in time with someone. And it doesn't mean that it's always a partner. It could be a family member or it could be a child. Relationships are at the foundation of everything. So thank you for being here on the day. And so we're going to go ahead on and get started. I think I did a nice little catch up for what we talked about yesterday. So let's go ahead on and get started about our topic. So if you remember something that we talked about yesterday, and I mentioned yesterday, is that trauma rewires everything. Like it rewires everything about our thoughts. It rewires how we view ourselves. It rewires how we view people. It rewires like even our perception of the world and if how we view ourselves in the world. So if you have gone through some type of trauma, you very well could feel, and we talked about this yesterday, I do remember that, you very well could go through the world feeling like there's something missing in you, or feeling like you don't measure up to other people, or that more people or people around you are more adequate, or they have more than what you have, and that what you have and what is God given has been put in you is not enough. And that people are more prepared, better at doing certain things like you, because it's something about going through these experiences that rewires everything. And there's a whole lot of research that shows that, medical research that shows the impact of trauma on a person's brain functioning. And Google it. Like Google. If you hear me say things, write it down and go Google it. Go do the research yourself, and particularly if it's something that really resonates with you, and something that you are dealing with and you're trying to make sense of, go Google, go research, go find the information out. And if you're not sure if it's correct research, then message me and I'll take a look at it for you and say, yeah, that's pretty good. Like that's not somebody just putting some goofy stuff out there. That's some pretty sound stuff. Message me. You're not here alone. We're here to help get you to your next steps. So trauma rewires everything. It rewires your perception about life. So when a person goes through complex trauma, because that's what we're talking about, or trauma in general, sometimes they can go from one end of the spectrum to another. So, and we talked about this yesterday. So they can respond to conflict, or they can respond to you or life or the world or whatever. They may go from one end of the spectrum, which means they may be very passive. They may think that they're powerless, and so that life is happening to them. They don't see themselves as an agent of change or someone that can actually influence their environment. They see themselves as someone that their environment influences them. So they're very passive. These are probably the peacemakers. They don't like conflict very much, and they're the ones that's moving heaven and earth, or trying to, because you can't move heaven and earth unless yeah, okay. So they do whatever they can to try to make peace, and and because they don't want the person to blow up, and they don't want to be triggered to go back to what it was like for them and when they were experiencing their trauma. So they're very passive people, very passive. Or they can be at the very other end of the spectrum, where now they have become very aggressive. They can become victimizers themselves, which is what we're talking about today. They can be very angry. They can be what we called yesterday the fight, flight, or freeze. They're probably more of the fight people. They're very external in how they express their emotions. And a lot of it is because that's patterns that they learn. And okay, so we'll get into that. I'm gonna say too much and get into what I'm talking about. So they can go to any opposite end of the spectrum. But for the purposes of today, so that I'm not overwhelming you and talking about too much at one time, we're going to be talking about the topic of when the victim becomes the victimizer. So when the person that has been abused or have gone through some sort of traumatic trauma, and for the purposes of this, we're going to talk about abuse, so violence, domestic violence, those type of things. They go to the opposite end of the spectrum, where now they have become the victimizer, or they have become the abuser themselves. So why do they seem to take on some of these behaviors? Because I know sometimes we'll see people like, well, I don't understand. Well, I don't understand why they doing that. Why, if you've been mistreated or if you have gone through certain things in your life, why would you project that onto other people? Or why would you then become the people that you hate or the people that hurt you? Why would you do that? Why do people do that? So one thing that I want to talk about, and I actually did, we talked about this a little while ago, is intervals. Usually, when people are have gone through traumatic things in their life, they develop what we call intervals. And sometimes you may not know that these intervals are there, but we see the fruit, and you probably see the fruit of intervals in your life. So what that looks like is when I've gone through something, and now as a result of going through it, because I don't want to ever go back to that moment. I don't ever want to be going ever to experience that again. I don't want my children to experience that again or to experience nothing like that. Then you start creating what we call these inner vows or these pacts, pacts of agreement in your life or in your heart. So it's a pact between you and yourself that whatever happened to you would not happen again. So you start creating these behaviors, or you start doing these certain things to try to ensure or control that what happened to you, you will not let happen again. And the problem about inner vows are that they're just that. They set up in your heart, and what you're doing is literally creating. How do I say this? You're creating walls in your heart. Because if you create a vow, then that means that you got to make sure that it's seen out, right? Like, that's usually how that works. If I'm creating a vow, and remember, you're creating this vow with yourself. So if I'm creating a vow with myself, then it becomes my responsibility to make sure that that vow comes to place, right? Or takes place. See, I think you may kind of see where I'm headed with this. So a person who has been abused can say, well, I am never, nobody's going to ever treat me like that again. I'm not going to ever have a moment where I feel powerless and not in control. So now the person starts being in control of everything. And whatever they need to do in order to maintain that control, they'll do. Because remember, it's the inner vow between you and yourself. And whatever you need to do to keep from feeling how you did when you were powerless or felt powerless, because no one is powerless. You give your power away. You give your power away. It can be taken, especially in the case of childhood abuse and rape and that kind of something. Your power can be taken away, but as an adult, and you can get your power back. But in vows, what we see is that the person then creates an atmosphere or these rules and these things in their life where they behave or act a certain way so that they can make sure that they don't ever feel the way that they felt when they were going through their traumatic experience or experiences. So intervals, and I could talk a little while longer on intervals. Another thing that happens is that that person develops what I call unresolved anger or righteous anger and entitlement. So I was treated a certain way, excuse me. I was treated a certain way, and now I'm entitled to make sure that someone else that reminds me or someone else that I encounter that may be, usually it's a power thing. Usually when we're talking about righteous entitlement and all that, usually it starts talking about power. So the person starts feeling really powerful, and usually their victims become people that are less powerful than them. So they start taking out their feelings, their emotions, their unresolved anger, their feelings of insecurity, their feelings of not being enough, or whatever feelings and emotions that came out of their trauma. They start taking that out on people that they view as less powerful. So now we go into talking about the cycle of control and the cycle of abuse, and we talk about manipulation and them saying and doing and behaving certain ways so that they can be the most powerful person in the room or the most powerful person in that situation. Because remember that it's all about control for them. If I can control this and this and this, and if I control certain pieces and all of that, then I won't go back to feeling how I felt when I didn't have it, when I didn't have control, when I was powerless, and when I didn't have a voice. Now, yesterday we talked a little about, I kind of gave y'all a little tease about personality disorders, but I said, okay, well, maybe I need to lay some groundwork before we actually get into talking about personality disorders like narcissism and bipolar disorder. Well, bipolar is not a personality disorder, borderline is. But before we start talking about those personality disorders, maybe we need to lay a little groundwork so you can kind of see how this stuff is starting to form. So unresolved anger, inner vows, and now you have a person that's controlling, that may manipulate, that may deceive, that may have all these kind of behaviors, and their whole goal is to control their environment so that they don't feel how they felt way back then. Y'all follow me? You follow me? Hope you follow me, because I know this can kind of get deep. I know it can get deep. I'm trying to simplify it. Okay, so unresolved anger. And anytime there's unresolved anger, anytime there's unresolved pain, it usually leads to bitterness. It usually leads to some roots of bitterness that form in your heart. And a lot of times people don't understand that when you hang on to these things, when they're not processed out, when they're not healed, when you hadn't gone to therapy, and when when you hadn't really processed what happened to you, not like you hadn't really processed through this stuff, that you could be carrying on views about other people. Because remember, trauma rewires everything, rewires your perception. You can be carrying on views about people or about subgroups, because racism. You can carry on views about people all because of your experience, because trauma rewires everything. So now we can see why men don't value, not men, not all men, but particularly men that have gone through things. If you just say they grew up in an abusive household where they saw their mother, mistreated, or they saw the women mistreated in their household, and they saw the men, being the source of that, then they may gather this view that women are weak, men are powerful. Or if you're the girl, you may gather the same view that women have no voice, that women, don't have any place in the home, that men are more powerful. You start gathering some views that come out of that about what men should do, about what relationships are, about what women should do, about what children are. Children are heard and not, they are heard and not seen, or they're seen and not heard. That's the word, the saying that we do. Children are supposed to be heard, seen but not heard, which means children don't have a voice. So we start carrying these views. And a lot of times we don't realize it may not show up as, you may not be domestically violent. You may not, be sexually abusive, but you may carry ideas about stereotypes and ideas about what women are, what men are, and what the roles should be. And next thing you know, because if you're not aware of all this stuff, you may have a cycle of abuse going on, but the abuse may not be something that people can see. It may be abuse that people cannot see, which is more emotional and more verbal abuse. You see where we're going with, how all of this fits with people with narcissism and all this stuff. Yeah. So the next thing, because I'm, almost out of time here, is they learn behaviors. Children learn behaviors. When you're going through traumas or having experiences growing up in households like that, in those environments, those toxic environments, you learn behaviors. You learn how to manipulate because you see it done. And that's exactly what the cycle of abuse is. You see when you're talking about domestic abuse, it literally starts out, okay, this is my dream person. Then this person start, maybe being emotionally abusive, or maybe it starts being verbally abusive, and then it gradually increase. And next thing you know, they're pushing, they're fighting, there's black eyes, but then they come back, and then there's this makeup period that they're, maybe showering you with gifts, or maybe doing everything that you want them to do. And there's this it's manipulation, it's deception, it's still power, it's still control. All of these behaviors start forming. So those behaviors don't just go away just because you move the environment. You don't just automatically say, okay, well, I'm not in that environment anymore, that I'm okay. No, because we learn behaviors. We learn behaviors from the people that model them to us. So those behaviors don't go away, they show back up. They show back up in your relationship. No, you may not hit. No, you are being sexually abusive. But that doesn't mean that you are still not being abusive. That doesn't mean that you're not being manipulative. That doesn't mean that you're not trying to control. That doesn't mean that you're being emotional abused. And a lot of times what we see in relationships is emotional abuse is hidden. And so a lot of times people don't even know that abuse is present, because our society has somehow or another, I'm not going to get on my rant about our culture, but somehow society has done a really good job at normalizing oppression of subgroups, oppression of women, oppression of children. Like, we have normalized to some degree oppression. And y'all, I'm not gonna get on my soapbox about that. I'm not. So when people say, hey, I think there's some abuse, like, something ain't quite right about this marriage, like something ain't quite right about my husband, my wife, like something ain't quite right about them, like I feel the effects, like I feel like I'm walking on eggshells, I feel like I can't be myself, I feel like, I don't have a say so, I don't have a word. A lot of times we don't listen because it's not a black eye. We don't even listen. But emotional abuse is a thing. Manipulation, control can manifest inside of a relationship, even if there is no evidence of any physical evidence of abuse. But if your personality is dwindled away, your self-esteem is being impacted, if you feel like you have no real say so, no real power, and the other person is controlling you, whether with their words, whether with their actions, whether with their behavior, because yelling, fussing, and all that stuff, all of that can also be control. It can all be manipulation. All of that can be. So I said all that to say, okay, that the victim can become the victimizer. And how it usually happens is because there's some inner vows there's some unresolved issues, there's some bitterness that has taken root in their hearts, their value for other people, for life, for the world, is all of that, because trauma rewires everything. Like, I'm gonna say that over and over, trauma rewires everything. They have had some things, some issues, some hurts, some pains that have not been unresolved, and now they're at the opposite end of the spectrum, where they have now taken on those behaviors because they hadn't had any intervention. They hadn't been to therapy. They didn't, they hadn't processed what happened to them. They hadn't had anybody ask them what happened to them and why, and they hadn't had any intervention. They don't know that they're doing some of these things. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't know the root. They don't know the root cause. They don't know. But sometimes they do. Sometimes they do. They're very aware of their behaviors. Sometimes people are very aware of their behaviors when they're doing them. But it's because you have to get to the root of what happened. You have to. You absolutely have to. And sad to say, sometimes with victims, with people, victimizers, it's hard for them to take responsibility. It's hard for them to take responsibility, which is why when I am counseling a woman, I'm saying that because that's usually, most of my clients are women. Usually when I'm counseling a woman and they're asking me questions like, well, do you think that my toxic relationship or my toxic marriage can survive? And I don't. And I don't. I don't. And there are very few chances that that it will. And if you're seeing a therapist, and your therapist is seeing you together and y'all's relationship has abuse in it, you need to fire them. You need to fire them. Because what should happen in therapy is that the therapist or the counselor sees you together, maybe for the first session. They're assessing for whether there's some abuse present, whether physical, emotional, verbal, physical, sexual. They're assessing for abuse that is present. And then at that point, they should separate you so they can do further assessment. Because if you are being abused, you're not going to be honest with it while your abuser is in the room. So your therapist should separate you. And it's going to take a great deal of you guys doing your separate work. But that means that the other person, the abuser, the victimizer, that they have to be willing to do their own work. And the reality is sometimes they're just not. They're just not. Those patterns, those even dealing with those traumas, those complex traumas, that stuff is hard work. It is hard. I think my pastor says it like this. Sometimes doing the work, the healing work, is harder than actually what happened to you. It is hard work. It can be hard work. It takes dedication. It takes commitment. But if you understand that the other part of you is dependent, like your viability in life, your vitality in life, and what you have been called to do is dependent on it. Even your generations, your future generations, your children's children, and how you raise your children, and the health, all of that is dependent on the decisions you make today. Then you do the work. I'm done, y'all. I'm done. So thank you for joining us today. Told y'all we talk about hard topics here because they happen so frequently. They're happening. People are dealing with these things everywhere, all day, every day. I can't tell you the amount of people that are being abused all over the world, but the numbers are high. The numbers are high, y'all. Child abuse. I think the last time I looked it up, it was like 1 in 4 children every minute or something like that. The stats on it is high. Ask any social worker. They will tell you that the stats on child abuse is high. The stats on abuse in relationships is high. Mental health. The stats on mental health is high. The stats on divorces is high. It's over 50%. So we know people are dealing with issues. They are dealing with very real issues. And they need somebody to step up and validate their experience and say, you don't have to stay there. Like you don't have to continue to struggle with your traumas. You don't have to. Help is available. Help is available. And one of the things that I'm hoping to see in the coming days with our administration, and future administrations, is that mental health becomes a priority. That mental health is just as available as medical help for all people. I love you guys. I am offering, I think it should be here in the comments. I am offering a free discovery call for those who were like, I just don't know what's going on. I really need some direction. I don't know where to go from here. Like I'm hearing all these things and I resonate with it a lot. It's a lot of situations you touch on that really resonate in my heart. I am offering discovery call. This discovery call is not for therapy because will not do therapy with you. That's not what I do. It's not my scope of practice in my coaching and consulting business. What I will do is refer you. If you're dealing with trauma, you need a therapist, you need a counselor. And so what I will do is refer you to a counselor. And when you're ready, you can come back to me, work with me one-on-one as a coaching client. And I will help you, push you. I will help motivate you. I will help you achieve, get to some goals. I will help hold you accountable. I will do whatever I can to provide you with resources. But I will not be your therapist. Not when you need a therapist. And the beauty of me being a therapist in a coaching position is that I know when something is outside of my scope of practice. I know that because I've been trained. Now, these coaches that's doing trauma work, we're not going to get onto that. Okay. Because coaches shouldn't be doing trauma work. They should not be doing trauma work. It shouldn't. It's dangerous. I love you guys. I see you back here tomorrow where we talk about hard life topics. Remember to schedule your free discovery call. It's 30 minutes of one-on-one time with me where I refer you, or whether we figure out, okay, I've gotten to a certain point and I'm ready to go a little bit further. Like I've gotten to a healing point and I just, right now I feel like I need to go to the next level. That's what I, as a coach, will help you do. So I love you guys. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, and see you back here tomorrow on Friday at noon Central Standard Time when we talk about hard life topics with simple solutions. I love you so much. Bye.